everyone. Welcome to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. I'm Melissa Albers.
And I'm JJ Parker. This podcast is for seekers. Seekers of happiness and joy. Seekers of a centered approach to success in life. Seekers of their true, authentic selves.
Get ready for some real talk on everything from anxiety, emotions, and habits to love, compassion, and forgiveness. We know you'll be challenged and enlightened by this conversation. We're so glad you're here. Let's dive in.
Well, I'm super excited, Melissa, because you want to talk about physics.
I don't remember saying that.
Yeah, you said you want to talk about momentum.
Oh.
So I was like, cool, let's get our 9th grade physical science lesson going.
Oh, that's where you went, huh? I must have asked the wrong question. For sure, I asked the wrong question then.
Well, because I always research these topics before we start, I was misguided, apparently. But I did come up with the definition of momentum.
Oh, I always like these. Right? Let's hear it.
Okay. So in physics, it's the quantity of motion of a moving body measured as a product of its mass and velocity.
Yawn.
Right? Or the impetus gained by a moving object.
Oh.
But I didn't know what impetus meant either, really. It's like that's like one of those words that someone would say it, and I'd just be like, yeah, totally. But I don't really know what it means.
The start of, the beginning of.
Yeah, the force or energy with which a body moves.
Yeah.
That's impetus.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Anyway.
I got it.
The idea that momentum is like energy
in motion. Oh, yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
You know, I just realized, too, John Maxwell has a book about, like, the different laws of things, and in one of those is the law of momentum, and he uses the example of a train on a track. And he says, so, like, if a big freight train is sitting on a track unmoving, it takes such a huge amount of effort to get it moving just the teeniest little bit. Like, it would seem almost impossible, really, when you think about it. But then once it gets moving, it takes very little to keep it moving because it's such a big machine, right?
Yeah.
And that, which is an interest, to me, that's a really good visual.
That's inertia. If you want to go back to your physics lesson.
No, I don't. I do not. I don't want to.
I can give you the definition of that because I looked it up too.
Well, do you want to?
It's a property of matter by which it continues in its existing state of rest or uniform motion in a straight line.
Okay. Wow.
Well, I like your visual, right? Because when we think about work or projects or things, and we're not doing them, it seems like it takes a tremendous amount of effort to get it going.
Yeah.
But once we have something going, it's like,
it's easy to keep it
going, right?
Right. You know, for me, the reason I asked you is because I feel like I've been stuck in a number of different parts of my life. This sounds dramatic. It's not that dramatic. But I did start reflecting on, when I feel stuck about certain things. So, like, maybe it's something as simple as eating right. And I'm in this pattern of eating mini Milky Ways, 3 at a time, twice a day. And there's nothing really wrong with that other than I don't want to be doing that. I want to be doing something different, but I just can't seem to make myself stop doing it, right? And I know that there's benefits for it, and I really actually want to do it, but I just can't seem to flip that switch to get the momentum going. But when I reflect on my past, I've been in this spot many, many times in my life, and I remember what it feels like to be in motion in the right direction. I remember what it feels like to feel so good to be eating right consistently.
Yeah.
I remember that feeling. I also remember the feeling of just eating junk all the time and not feeling good. So why is it so hard to start momentum with something as simple as stop eating so much sugar? Like, it's that kind of thing, you know? And then And then
because the sugar train truck along super fast, a lot of momentum.
so much momentum.
There's so much sugar on that train.
I know. I love sugar. I even said to my dad, my body loves sugar. My dad, I thought he'd say something profound. He goes, oh, mine too. I was like, no, don't say that.
Well, when we're talking about, in your example there,
yeah,
there's two things happening. You're trying to stop momentum on one activity.
That's
and
true.
You're trying to start it on another. So,
yeah, that's true. So there's double energy required.
So it's double, right?
Oh, it's a double down.
Yeah, when I think about momentum, when I first started thinking about it, when you're kind of like proposing this as like a topic for a pod, is like I was thinking about it as a new project, right?
Yes.
Like you're at zero.
Yep.
And you want to start a new thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, like most of the getting started, it just, like you said, it seems to take a tremendous amount of energy.
Yeah.
But when I was reflecting on that, it really, to me, feels like it takes a tremendous amount of emotional energy to get started, that the actual act of getting started is usually pretty easy.
Yeah. Like, you're onto something there for sure.
Like we have our old friend, John Lundberg, that whenever I talk about a project, he just goes, baby steps. JJ, what's a baby step? I'm like, okay, John, like... You're right.
I love him so much.
You're right. It doesn't take a lot to get started. It takes just one tiny little step.
Yeah.
But you can sit there for like days or weeks or months or sometimes years and be like, how can I get going? I can't even get going.
Right.
Right.
And then all sorts of other stuff gets packed around that. Why can't I? I'm embarrassed to talk about this. Here we are again.
Yeah.
Like there's all these old tapes, I think, that play when we're not moving. When we're not moving, which I think is why people avoid being still, because they're afraid of what the boogeyman's going to tell them, But like even you talk about work, like with the self-awareness journey, there's been lots of times, and in previous projects we've worked on, where we will have so much momentum going and it's so fun.
Yeah.
And then when a natural logical conclusion to something happens, and we're tired actually from the work of the momentum, we're tired, even though it was easy and we were in the flow, it still took a fair amount of energy. And I kind of think a natural period of rest and recovery. And there's also a natural gestation period for new things to emerge. But there's something that happens where even in that gestation period, we start putting extra pressure on, or I'd certainly put pressure on, like, oh, I should feel better about this. I should, why can't we just get started on this? Like, oh yeah, we talked about 5 ideas and I haven't done one of them and I just don't feel like it. And I just feel blech, like, and then I get kind of mad about that. Like, well, what does this mean? What's the grander lesson that's being learned? Well, probably nothing. I just am in a moment where I can't get momentum.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
right?
You're trying to make it way more dramatic.
Dramatic, yeah. How dare you call out something so obvious?
So, like, getting something going. Like, I want to talk about, like, so it's tough getting something going.
Yeah.
Once it's going, we talk about, or you were talking about how good it feels sometimes when something is going, right? And I think we've talked about being in the flow, right? This is kind of like the this state of creation. Everything's kind of easy, so that's awesome. But I don't think what we taught during those episodes, we never really talked about the idea that when you've got good momentum on a thing, your fear that it's going to stop.
Oh yeah,
because that is real. I don't know that you and I ever talked about that, but I feel
that's actually true.
It is like things are going really well right now. I hope I hope we don't screw anything up. I hope.
Yeah. I hope it works like we want it to.
I hope this just keeps going, right? And then you kind of start clinging to the feeling that everything is going well. And then it's like a little bit of like, when's the other shoe going to drop? When's
that's interesting.
When's the train going to derail? You get a little paranoid.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel that?
Oh, yeah. But, and that's based on fear. You use the word, and it's exactly right. You know what else I just thought of as you said that? What about the fear that when you are in a quiet period trying to get momentum going, you're so afraid that you won't, that you falsely get going on something else because of that fear too. Like fear comes into play a lot with momentum.
Yeah. Are you suggesting that one would distract themselves with some other project instead of doing the thing they're supposed to do?
And tell themselves that it was okay? Yes, that's exactly what
that's
I'm
like my go-to thing.
Suggesting. No, it's not. Well, not always. But we have done that. I've done that. I think we all do. It's like, well, how many times have you said to yourself, oh man, I just got to clean this house. I'll feel so much better if the house is clean. I just got to get this place. I can't stand the dirty dishes.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do it, right? And then pretty soon you're out in the garage underneath your car, right? Adjusting the ball bearings in a vehicle's wheel that doesn't need it as an effort to not have the momentum going that would make you feel better. But the fear of, what's that going to look like? How much energy is that going to take? Like, oh my God, how much work will prevent you? And so fear almost pushes us into activity that actually isn't the right kind of momentum.
Melissa and I are huge self-awareness nerds. We've been working on this stuff for a really long time, and we love talking about it and sharing it with all of you. We've actually brought all of the stuff we've made into an online course, and we think it's really great. The course starts by learning about yourself and how your mind-body connection works. It dives into your thoughts and feelings, and then helps you learn how to become your true, authentic self. Start your journey today. Head to theselfawarenessjourney.com to learn more and sign up. You and I have had projects, and even this project, where we've had periods of like significant output.
Yep.
Right? Things seem to really be going really well. And then they stop.
Yes.
Then it either sort of like slowly stops and we don't notice right away, or it hits a brick wall.
Right.
Those are the two we've experienced together.
Right. True.
When that energy in a project stops, how does that feel?
Like a failure.
Yeah.
Were you going to say that?
Yeah, it does feel like a failure.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, it feels very unsettled, right? Like you weren't able to complete the thing. You never got to the goal. You went across the finish line. It doesn't feel good.
No. But also what's sort of funny about that is there was no real specific goal to begin with. And we were in the joy of the creation without having a particular specific long-term goal. Like we set a lot of short-term goals. But I think that this is life. Don't you think so? Like people create like these long-term images or ideas of what is a goal.
Yeah.
And there's natural starts and stops. I don't know if I'm hijacking where you're going here, but this is an interesting thing to think about.
I was trying to just think about this idea that like when we're really grooved in on something and life's going well, and then it slows down a bit, like a little twist and turn in the road, or something doesn't go like we thought,
right?
That doesn't feel good. Right. Although if you zoom out in the big picture, it's probably not that big of a deal. But in the moment, it feels really bad.
It feels like a failure.
Yeah.
It feels like a failure.
Yeah. It's like, I was trying to come up with an analogy. You had the train analogy, but it's more like we're in our car going from point A to point B, and there's some traffic in between there, and like at
stop signs.
Yeah, we're going 70. Now we're going 5 miles an hour, and then there's a stop sign, and then we got to turn, and you're just. It's not like life isn't a consistent speed thing. No. Right.
But why does judgment and fear have so much to do with our feelings of movement and momentum?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
It's like we have an expectation that like our work output somehow has to be super consistent. That's maybe like a societal thing, possibly. Maybe it's deeper than that.
Yeah.
But even like think about like the 40-hour work week, or you know,
right.
some people listening have like a 60-hour work week.
Right.
You know,
right.
It depends on
right.
what you're doing. But like this idea that we've somehow like broken our work down into what is supposed to be like a predictable sort of time chunk.
Right. And that looks normal. That looks normal for everybody.
And the output should be consistent. And to me, this is like a remnant of the industrial age, right? Like, oh no, we've made factories and everything's a repeatable process, and the humans are a repeatable process too, but they're not.
Right.
And so as a human, like I think it's extremely natural for your work output to ebb and flow. Sometimes it's super high, sometimes it's a little lower, and that's okay. Like we shouldn't have this expectation that like we can perform like robots in a super consistent way over long periods of time.
Right. And get in our heads and be fearful if we have these different periods of speed or slowing down or stopping. Well, I mean, the same thing applies even in relationships. Like you're talking about work, but like think about your spouse or your significant other. Like, don't you think it's completely normal in the relationship over periods of time where things are great and speeding up and things are easy and it's just like, yeah, we're on this groove together. And then all of a sudden for really long periods of time or for short periods of time or whatever, there's a slowdown and a stopping of that.
Kids.
Dogs. Kids. Distractions. Bills. House projects. Okay, sorry, that's for a different pod. But it's the same thing, right? And so I think if we're a crowd pleaser personality, then we think our relationship should all be great, right? My marriage should be this way. My significant other and I should be like this, and that will represent me being me on my best day. And then all of a sudden, if something doesn't go well and there's a rocky period and it feels harder, slower, not in alignment, not in sync, suddenly we're back in that, something's terribly wrong. And really, I think it's just the human energy responding to all sorts of things, just like you're talking about.
Yeah. So that's an interesting idea that, like, your relationship, the energy sort of about your relationship goes up and down.
Yeah. There's an ebb and flow. Don't you think?
I do. I think so. You're right. That does not sound like a comfortable conversation to have. General. I mean, do you and Mitch talk about that?
Well, we do now.
You do now, but I'd say that that's probably a mature.
Yeah.
A mature relationship.
Yeah.
And get to that point where you can talk about that.
Right.
I mean, for a lot of people, that sounds like a really hard conversation to have. Like,
because it illustrates judgment, or it would typically illustrate judgment, but really it doesn't have to. It can just be objective noticing. Because I think, in anything, there have actually been times in my relationship, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn or talking too privately. Like, I've been in my marriage and I've just thought, God, everything is going so great right now. It's just so fun. I love doing stuff together and I just love all of this. And there have been times when I've just thought, I got to remember how awesome this is for the next time that he's so annoying. I'm sure he's saying the exact same thing about me. But I think, again, that's just the momentum of things. And I think when things get slower or heavier or harder in anything, not just your whatever significant partnership, but in anything, that there is this period of time where it slows down and it's challenging to decide how do I start to increase the speed in something towards what I think is best. And that's the piece that I'm really curious about. Like, how often are we creating momentum for the mere sake of movement, not because it's what's best? Like, I think that's a really important distinction as we talk about creating momentum for things for ourselves. Is I think, because a lot of times when you're numbing yourself out or you're scared to face your own truth or you don't really want to, I think that's a really easy place to do that, is to go, I'm just going to go do something, make something, be busy, stay active, create momentum socially or whatever.
Yeah, distract yourself.
Distraction, or numb myself out because it feels scary to not have momentum right now.
That sounds like a whole nother podcast in itself.
How many times do you think we say that? A lot. I think we say that a lot.
Entertaining yourself.
Yeah.
Let's get back to, and this kind of dovetails a little bit into habit, like momentum and habit, right? Because if we loop back to the idea of baby steps, right? Make a little bit of progress every single day.
Yeah.
And that builds and builds and builds until you're at a point where you might realize, whoa, I'm making a huge amount of progress towards my goal.
Yeah.
How do you keep, how do you break down a big project or big life goal into what those little steps are?
That's such a good question. You know, like in my coaching, when people will ask about big stuff like this, it might not be a personal goal. It could be really anything. I always feel like the natural thing for me that comes up is put a timeline associated to it. So even if if it feels really, really big, what can you do in 1 year? Or what can you do in 30 days? Like whatever the goal is. I don't know. Like if you're trying to master tennis, for example, or, whatever. It's just 30
days will be plenty.
Duh. As if, but it's sometimes easier if you assign a timeline with it, because then you can work backwards from that. Because otherwise, sometimes those big goals seem so overwhelming that it's you have no idea where to start. You have no idea how you're going to know when you get there. What does it look like? How does it feel? Who's there with you? Then what do you do after that? What if it's your life goal? I mean, I just don't think we have the capacity to make such long-term goals like that. Most humans don't, because it gets very discouraging if you go through periods that the momentum isn't there. So I almost feel like if you attach a timeline to it, it seems like it might be better.
Yeah. From experience, I had not purposely used this idea of momentum until recently. So before I would have goals, right? And we talked about vivid vision stuff, right?
Right. Yep.
So before I would have goals, I do them with the vivid vision, especially for the company. But I didn't do a very good job of breaking them down into what are we doing every week and month to build towards those?
Yeah.
Recently, I've been doing that. And without getting too spreadsheety about it. I do have a spreadsheet if you want to see it later.
By the way, his eyes got half closed and he shifted left, shifted right, and I was like, oh, he's got a spreadsheet.
I totally have a goal spreadsheet. But, so as you know, one of my goals one of my goals for flying is actually when I retire, I want to be able to fly an airplane anywhere in the U.S. I want to go.
Oh, cool.
Right?
Yeah.
I can't do that today.
Right.
I don't have enough experience. I don't have the right ratings. And it takes a super long time to get that amount of competency to just fly through any weather anywhere you want, right?
Yeah.
So after I kind of realized that was one of my life goals, I started breaking that down into okay, what actually gets me there over the next 10 years. I mean, a 10-year scope of a goal is huge, right?
Yeah, and most people wouldn't have the chops to make a goal that long.
Well, we'll see if I make it.
When I say most, I mean me.
But for this year, I was okay, the thing that gets me closer to that goal is to fly 1.5 hours per week for this year.
Oh,
that's it. I mean, it's that's not actually very hard to do.
Right.
Do something for an hour and a half at 52 times, right?
Yeah.
So that was my goal. And that will bring me a bit closer to that really audacious, bigger goal, right?
Right. So you kind of do the same thing. You assign a timeline to it.
So I assigned a timeline, and I tried to get it down to a chunk of, an activity level that I knew I could fit into my schedule.
Right.
And again, it's kind of like a baby step thing. Right. But the thing that tipped it for me was don't get that number of hours of flying before the end of the year. If I broke it down to every week I have to do this amount, it's way easier.
Oh, I see. Okay.
You know what I mean? It's if you go oh no, you have to get 90, or that works out to be 70 some hours for the year. Holy crap, that's so much. How am I going to do that much? What would end up happening is
you'd have no momentum.
In September, I'd be oh man, I never did any of the stuff I said I was going to do.
Right, because you would have started momentum.
Right. So the idea of building the momentum.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing about that is telling Amber that goal.
Yep.
Right? She can support me in that. Are you keeping up with what you said you were going to do?
Yeah.
Which is super helpful too.
Right. You know, the other thing I think that we need to not miss in this topic, which is so important, is checking in with your inner being on if what you want to create momentum about is for the right reasons. In other words, is it really serving you? Is it for the right reasons? If you're in a staying period,
what would the right reasons be?
Because it feels good.
Okay.
Because it feels good.
Simply that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing it because I want it to look good, I want to say that I did this, I want this accolade, I want other people to think that I'm this. I feel like this is the next logical goal progression in my life, in my history, in my professional career, blah, 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 blah. Those are all external things. And you still may create momentum and do those things. But I think we are way more as human beings, more inclined to create momentum over something that really serves us because it feels good. I think it's way easier to create that momentum then. And I think sometimes if you can't get that momentum started, it might be a real simple question. Is this in my highest and best interest?
Yep.
Does this serve me in having this?
Yep.
Will it make me feel good? Because I feel like that will unlock the door to all sorts of other thinking choices and activities and planning and everything.
Yeah. So
if
you're stuck on getting started with something,
right,
really sit with it and figure out why you're having trouble getting started, because things that maybe you can start easily are maybe the things you're supposed to be doing, the things that have more resistance.
Right.
That is a whole nother topic because I have a view of projects that have resistance to starting, right? Are oftentimes the things you should be doing.
Yeah, I know. Well, because from the war of art.
Yeah, because you're scared of them.
Yeah.
And that's where you should be leaning in.
Yeah.
Whereas the easy things you're not scared of that, and and those are things you've already done. So
right. And
so it's a really interesting.
That is juxtaposed position, and I think by asking the question, will I be better in the having of this? Is this in my highest and best interest? Right? I think that's such a great filtering question to help you be okay with starting in whatever speed you're capable of, baby steps or whatever.
Yep. Well, now I feel like I have to go reevaluate all the projects I'm working on to see if...
You can show me your spreadsheet sometime if you want.
Awesome. Did you enjoy this episode? Please go to your favorite podcast platform to subscribe, rate, and leave a review so others can discover it as well.
Growing self-awareness is a lifelong journey, and there's always further to go. And it's better when we're all in it together. Please think of someone you know who could benefit from hearing today's conversation and share this episode with them. We can't thank you enough for listening. Until next time, happy exploring, seekers.